football in the books, and what a weekend it was. This may have been the most action-packed weekend of college football we've seen thus far, and because of it, we have got a lot we need to talk about. As you all know, on Mondays, we recap the weekend we just saw here on Through the Haze. Glad you could make it. As you come into the live, be sure to hit the like button, hop down and chat. Let me know what you thought about the games this weekend. Let me know the games that stood out for you, or just any football talk you want to participate in. We love to get active here. As always, thank you to Home Field for being for working with the channel. I apologize. If you're into vintage college football apparel, head over to homefield.com. They've got you covered with the best college football fan apparel in the game. And a special thank you to Shady Mile Bourbon. Shady Mile Bourbon working with the channel. They have their rye, they have their wheat. If you're going to be enjoying something this weekend, why not make it Shady Mile? But with all that being said, there's a lot we need to talk about. Now, I'm going to start off with this right here because I think it leads us into the obvious conversation that we need to have right off the bat. And Eddie, we're going to get to Miami. Don't get me wrong. That's one of my favorite moments we've seen in football for a while. But let's talk about the game of the weekend first. And I think that it's not going to come as any surprise that it's Oklahoma beating Texas in the Red River Rivalry, one of the biggest rivalries in college football, one of the most premier rivalries in all of sports, and this weekend showed exactly why. Now, whenever we talk about this game, there are so many ways we can discuss it. There are so much that we really need to break down. And I think the first thing that I want to talk about are the expectations going into that game, because I'm not going to shy away from the fact that going into that game, I had picked Texas to come out on top, though I didn't think that Texas would be able to cover the spread. I looked at the spread and said, there's no way they're winning by 5. I had them winning by as little as 3-2, a safety. I thought the margins would be that small. And in fact, going into this game, I even stated that Texas's defense, though I think it's a good defense, and even coming out of that game, I still think it's a very good defense. They had never been tested this season by an offense even close to the Oklahoma offense. Alabama's offense is still trying to find their identity. We're going to talk about the Crimson Tide later because offensively, they looked pretty good this past weekend. Some things you need to clean up on, but they're starting to paint the picture that they could be a dangerous team. Still a lot of work to do. Oklahoma is showing you they're a dangerous offense. They're not in a position where they're showing you, hey, if we clean up this, that, and the other, we're going to be a dangerous offense. No, Oklahoma is showing you right now we're a dangerous offense. And one of the things that I looked at going into this game, and one of the things that ultimately had me pick Texas, was that Oklahoma hasn't had that strong rushing attack like we saw them have last season. But it's interesting because coming into this season, those of you that have been around the channel for a while will have remembered I talked about Oklahoma needing to develop an off-speed pitch. Ironically, they have developed that off-speed pitch. And what I mean when I say that is Oklahoma can score quick. Jeff Lebby can score as quick as anybody in college football. We've seen that time and time again. But what about being able to play a little bit of control, burn some clock, put the defense in advantageous positions, not only for your offense, but also for your defense? Could you do that? Well, the answer is yes. Oklahoma has vastly improved their time of possession compared to last season, and they're doing so in an offense that does not have that strong rushing attack yet that they had last season. That was a big reason why I'd picked Texas to ultimately win this game. I thought the teams were much more evenly matched than a lot of people did, but when I looked at this, I just thought that maybe Texas's ability to run would give them another little layer to where they could keep OU's offense off the field. They could keep testing OU's defense and try and keep that Oklahoma defense honest. Because one thing we know about the Brent Venables defense, he likes to pin his ears back. He likes to be very aggressive. It's something we've seen time and time again. And so when you're playing Brent Venables, you need a complete offense. You need to be able to try and keep that defense honest. You don't want them just pinning their ears back and feeling like it's go mode for 4 quarters. That's the last position you want to be in. And so I thought maybe that Texas running game would provide some alleviation and be able to help them open things up. However, that's not exactly how it went. Whenever we looked at this, Texas had no ability to run the football, at least consistently, not the way they had in weeks prior. And I think that was a big reason as to why we saw the offense of Texas sputter so often. because they weren't able to put together the drives in the manner that they had hoped. Now, that's not to say that Texas had a poor offensive performance. I don't believe they did. Putting 30 points on the board, I think you feel good about that. That's certainly not to say that Texas had a poor offensive performance, and Texas still rushed for 129 yards. But the thing that really stood out to me was that Dylan Gabriel put the team on his back and accounted for 100+ yards on the ground. That was really great to see, because going into this game, you had to imagine that Oklahoma would have to have some semblance of a rushing attack in order to be able to come out on top. Where would that rushing attack come from? And it came from Dylan Gabriel. We know that Jeff Lebby likes to utilize mobile quarterbacks, and this is a great example of him doing just that. In the game, Dylan Gabriel, 23 of 38, 285 yards, 7.5 average, 1 touchdown, a QBR of 92.8. But to me, what really allowed this offense to flourish was what he did with his legs. 14 carries, 113 yards, 8.1 average, 1 touchdown, 44 was the long. That allowed that Texas defense to be put in positions to where they didn't know what was coming next. And even if they thought they knew, if they got a little bit over aggressive, Dylan Gabriel would take advantage of that. That kept Oklahoma's offense in this game. Now, I've seen a lot of talk about how this game came to be. And I think at the end of the day, one thing we can all acknowledge, the better team won. Oklahoma was the better team Saturday. Point blank, period, in my opinion. Oklahoma didn't allow the Texas defensive front to dominate them. Oklahoma was able to generate pressure on Quinn Ewers, and they were able to make Quinn Ewers uncomfortable. Now, one of those Quinn Ewers interceptions was not on Ewers, the one where Jatavian Sanders had the ball hit him in the hands, and Billy Bowman made an unbelievable play, hit him real hard. The ball got dislodged. That's one of those interceptions that I hate that goes on the quarterback, because that wasn't on Quinn. That was a brilliant defensive play. That was a beautiful defensive play. That's the type of physical defense you're looking for. That necessarily wasn't on Quinn Ewers. But that first interception was as head-scratching of an interception as I've seen in quite some time. You have your guy running a slant route. Gentry Williams is playing inside on the slant. If you're a quarterback and you look out there and you see a corner right on your wide receiver, you know your receiver is running a slant, and the cornerback is playing inside leverage, you cannot throw the slant. The cornerback is telling you, I am willing to give you everything to the outside. You will not throw inside. And he looked at it, realized he didn't have the pass, and somehow, some way, still decided to throw the football. I didn't get that interception at all. It was perplexing. That really set the tone. That this Oklahoma defense was going to be aggressive, and they were going to be right on you. Going into this game, I highlighted Gentry Williams as a player you needed to know, and that was exactly why. That was exactly why. So the Oklahoma secondary took care of business, and they were able to do something to this Texas offense that we've talked about here on the channel a lot, and they were able to minimize the deep play. This was a big question I had going into this game. Right? What Quinn Ewers will we see? And in fairness, Quinn Ewers was good during this game. 31 of 37, 346 yards, an average of 9.4, 1 touchdown, 2 interceptions. Like I said, one of those interceptions was awful. I don't know why you throw that football. I don't know what compelled him to throw that football. There's no explanation. The other one was phenomenal defensive play by Oklahoma. And that's not to say that the first interception by Gentry wasn't a great defensive play. Gentry played that beautifully, as well as you could have. But the second one was much more a bang-bang play on the defensive side. You're not going to win big games with bad turnovers. And this is the big question I had. What Quinn Ewers will we see? Because thus far, Quinn Ewers was unbelievable in his deep passing attack versus Alabama. And I've gone back, I've rewatched a lot of those clips, and in a lot of those clips, it's wild how good the passes are. In a lot of those clips, it's wild how good the coverage was, how good the Alabama DB played it, and Quinn put it in a breadbasket. I always bring up that moon shot where he threw it so high in the air and it came down, and the wide receiver was in a full sprint, and he put his hands like this. The DB right on his back, and the ball literally sailed almost straight down right into his hands. It's one of the prettiest throws I've seen all year. But we have not seen Quinn be able to test defenses deep consistently. And this was a game where Oklahoma did not allow them to test it deep, and Quinn never had the opportunities. Sark's offense is predicated on being able to spread you out and then beat you deep. And if he can't beat you deep, you're getting him to play your brand of football. One of the things I talked about for UT, it's time for you to start dictating the style of ball you play to your opponents. And you're not going to be able to do that all the time, but you certainly have got to come with some semblance of a game plan and be able to enact it. Part of it was that we've seen the Texas offense not be able to hit on their deep shots before. A big part of it was that the Oklahoma defense took it away from them. That was the big part of it, is that Oklahoma did not allow them those opportunities, ultimately taking away Texas's opportunity to stretch the defense, test the defense, and open up some things in the short to intermediate. Because Texas was living in the short to intermediate, but the Brent Venables defense, once again, is one that lives by, we will keep everything in front of us, or we're coming downhill and we're coming after you. That's really the style he likes to play. So looking at this game, Oklahoma pulls off a massive win. And we need to ask what this means in the long run for the Oklahoma Sooners. And as you could see in the title, can the Oklahoma Sooners make the college football playoffs? This was a topic that before the season had started, we had lightly floated. Now, one of the things that I always said was that, look, I'm not going to say never, but there's a lot of work that Oklahoma had to do from last year into this year to be able to be in that position. Well, a lot of that work has been done. And now we need to look at the remaining schedule for the Oklahoma Sooners. And we can see they have a bye week, and then they go UCF, Kansas, Oklahoma State, West Virginia, BYU, TCU, and then the Big 12 championships. So let's go through this. UCF, look, UCF is one of those teams where they have some talented players. You don't want to overlook them. I can say the same thing about every team on this list, so I'm going to go ahead and give that blanket statement. You don't overlook any of these teams, but we saw what Baylor just did to UCF. Oklahoma is a vastly superior team. They're playing a vastly superior brand of football right now. Next, we move into Kansas. Kansas is a good team. Look, Kansas isn't a bad football team, but I fully expect Oklahoma to beat them. I think that when we look at how Kansas defensively is going to play the Oklahoma Sooners, I just don't think it's going to be a recipe for success for the Jayhawks. And then when we look at what Oklahoma is going to want to do offensively, I think that they're going to have a game plan in place that they're going to be able to test the Oklahoma defense in the early portions of the game, but I don't think it's enough through the end of the second quarter into the second half to make the difference. I think Oklahoma's defense is going to prevail. I think the offense is going to be able to prevail. I think the defense is going to be able to prevail. But I am very excited to see what Kansas puts together to try and attack Oklahoma. That's going to be a great test for your defense. It's another little wrinkle, a mobile quarterback that you get to go out there. It's great learning experience. I'm really excited for that Kansas game, actually. We look at Oklahoma State. I don't have much to say about Oklahoma State right now. Oklahoma State right now is all over the place. Look, we need to have some serious conversations about Gundy. I don't think this is the time to do it, but we're going to have those conversations about the future of Oklahoma State, especially with Texas and Oklahoma leaving the Big 12. In theory, you would like to say Oklahoma State is in a perfect position to step into the vacuum and the void that will be left by those two behemoths leaving the Big 12 for the SEC. But in practice, I don't know that I can say with full confidence that I believe that Oklahoma State is the team to step up into that void. I don't think anybody can say that with full confidence. You would like to be able to say it, but I just don't think in practice we can say that after what we saw last year, after what we've seen this year. Keep your eye on Oklahoma State, but I think Oklahoma puts a stamp on that quote-unquote rivalry before they head to the SEC emphatically. West Virginia is actually a game that I'm really keyed in on. West Virginia has been a better team than many people anticipated, but I don't think you're going to catch OU overlooking West Virginia. I just don't. That was a tough game last year for the Sooners, and I think that's one they have circled. That's one they're going to want to get back in blood. So Oklahoma versus West Virginia, I think they're going to be very keyed into that game. BYU at Provo. Now, BYU is one of those teams we talk about all the time as being a team that you do not want to sleepwalk into. They have this nasty knack. They're not alone. Kent State was another one. They have this nasty knack of being able to knock off a good team. Every single year, it feels like some of these teams will knock off a major opponent. Now, I'm certainly not predicting BYU to do so. I think Oklahoma is better in every single facet on the field, coaching, whatever have you. But still, point being, don't overlook BYU. And then finally, you have TCU. TCU is not the TCU they were last year. I still think they have some good players, but at the end of the day, I think Oklahoma is going to look at that game, last game before the Big 12 championship, and they understand what's at stake here, which leaves the Big 12 championship. And I've already gone out on a limb and said that I believe Texas and Oklahoma will rematch for the Big 12 championship. The winner of that game will probably get a berth to the playoffs. If Oklahoma is to win that game, and having one out, they are making the college football playoffs. There is no probably. There is no this, that, or the other. They would be an undefeated team making the college football playoffs. And if that was to happen, it would be one of the most impressive turnarounds we've seen from coaching in a long, long time. In a very long time. Only a handful of coaches you can point to, and within 3 years, they had truly done an entire turnaround. That looks exactly like where Oklahoma is headed. We're in year 2, and they just downed Texas. Now, I get it. That's a rivalry game. Anything can happen. It's a little bit of a wild game, all well and good. But the improvement that we've seen from Oklahoma, it cannot be denied. Even if you're an Oklahoma detractor, it cannot be denied. They are one of the most improved football teams in the nation. Their offense is better. Their defense is playing at an insane level relative to where they were last year. So it's something we certainly need to watch. It's something we certainly need to watch. I'm interested to see how they continue looking going forward. I'm interested to see if the running game comes about because they have some talented running backs, but it's something that I do truly believe will need to emerge. I truly do believe that. I think you want to be as a complete of a football team as you can, week in, week out. And I think if the running game emerges, it will unlock another level to this Oklahoma offense. You think they're good now. You think they're efficient now. You think they're dangerous now. Wait until they can consistently run the football like they did last year. That will unlock another layer to this offense that will not only allow them to be explosive, it will allow them to completely dictate the pace. And when you do that, you're having entirely different conversations about what the possibility of your offense is. So, yeah, going to be really interesting to see what happens going forward for Oklahoma. Big win against Texas. I do believe they are going to rematch. But nonetheless, I think if you're an Oklahoma fan, you need to be very happy about what you saw this past weekend. I've seen a lot of takes. I just think that beating Texas in that environment is a huge win. I think it's one of the best wins we've seen all year because I still believe that Texas is a good team. I still believe Texas is a good team. Games. Yes, some of them. That was also one of those games. Bama had an offensive coordinator leave right before, and then Sark literally took over offensive play calling like 2 weeks before the playoff game, which was, a recipe for disaster no matter what. So yeah. In the rematch, who would I pick? I'd probably be inclined to pick Oklahoma in the rematch for the manners in which they won, especially they'd be able to develop a rushing attack. I think that they'd be able to test this Texas defense even more. Coming out of the Alabama game, when I got my hands on the All-22 film, I was sitting there watching it thinking to myself, man, this is interesting because it made me simultaneously feel better about the loss and simultaneously I felt worse about the loss because getting my hands on the All-22 film, I realized how many opportunities there were that Alabama just did not take advantage of. Point blank, period. And I think that Oklahoma's offense is a more dangerous passing attack. And that's where I've always stated when I look at Texas, I'm always talking about that Texas defensive front. If I'm talking about their secondary, I'm talking about Jahdae Barron because I think Jahdae Barron is a wildly amazing playmaker. I mean, he's great. He is a great football player. But I think the Texas secondary, if you're going to attack them, that's exactly where. That's exactly where you're going to attack them. And I saw that week too. And that's part of the reason why instantly after the game, I stated when I saw the All-22, I feel better and worse about Alabama losing to Texas because I got my hands on the All-22. I got to see what was happening downfield. And I felt better that, hey, our wide receivers actually were running open a good bit of the time. Made me feel worse that, hey, our wide receivers were running open. And like we didn't do anything with it. So, yeah. Really just great win for Oklahoma. It's going to be really interesting to see what they do going forward. Oklahoma still left points on the board in this game as well. I think we have a cleaner rematch in the Big 12. Yeah, no doubt. Factor. No doubt about it. Oh, you went. Texas red zone offense has been not good all year. Texas red zone defense or offense has not been great all year. Yeah, that's been a real bad issue for them all season long. All season long. Red zone offense. So, what were OU's keys to victory in this game? One, they took away the deep pass. They did not allow Steve Sarkisian to attack them deep, and I think that was big. Two, they kept Texas's defense honest by attacking the DBs. And then three, Dylan Gabriel using his legs. And this goes back to something I was complaining about a while back, was that if you have an opportunity to run the football, and it wasn't in terms of Oklahoma, I was complaining about this in terms of Alabama playing Texas, where there were times where Jalen Milroe had an opening to run. He didn't run. And I was perplexed as to why he didn't run in that game. Because, I mean, look, Dylan Gabriel's a great athlete, and you saw what he was able to do when he was able to run the football. It opened up the passing game. It allowed the Texas defense to be a little less aggressive. It kept them more honest. It's a huge catalyst for Oklahoma being able to find success. And then, of course, the goal line stand. Stopping them on the 1 yard line was massive. That was absolutely massive. Now, I don't know why some of those run plays Sark called were so long developing. Like you have in almost what Alabama would call an elephant package, where Alabama used to get their big linemen up, your two biggest defensive linemen, and then you'd have Derrick Henry behind them. And if you can stop it 4 times, you can stop it 4 times. But what you wouldn't see Alabama do is call that and then have the running back start taking 3 drifting steps to the right, trying to read which hole he's going to. No, you bang through off the rip. You don't play pitter patter. You bang through off the rip. Now, granted, he's playing pitter-patter because Oklahoma was standing everything up on the defensive line of scrimmage. They were just stonewalling him. And then you saw whenever he actually did go to float out, they tried to put Sweat almost as a pulling guard, as a lead blocker. McCullough met him there, and then they were able to stop the running back right there. Huge stop. Huge stop. Worst viewers to question something. Sark had to revert back to a lot of RPO. Well, he didn't revert back to it, Chris. That's their bread and butter. He didn't revert back to RPO. That's what they do, is RPO. That's their entire bread and butter. That's the Sark offense. For defense, 100%. Yeah, Texas's red zone defense isn't bad. It's their red zone offense that just has not been good. Texas's red zone offense has just not been good. Because I know that's something Texas Homer was very worried about heading into this game. That he'd talked about was that the Texas red zone offense really needed to get better. RPO was the game plan. Yeah, that's always going to be the game plan with Sark. That's going to be what Sark wants to do. It's how he attacked Alabama. And it's quite frankly why I was so frustrated in that game, because some of the DBs kept playing run. Whenever they would show the RPO, the DBs would step forward for Alabama, and I couldn't figure out why, because they weren't running the football. They ran the football well the last 7 minutes, but up until that point, they weren't running the football at all. There was no reason to play the run. Oklahoma didn't. They were much more disciplined in reading. Oklahoma's generating a lot of turnovers. No doubt about it. No doubt about it. All right. Let's move forward. We've been on this game for almost 30 minutes. Let's move to Alabama, Texas A&M, right? Because this is a game right here. This is a game right here. I'm going to get off this right here. Alabama, Texas A&M. You heard a lot of talk going into this game, and the line kept moving down and down and down and down. And even I was sitting here looking at this Texas A&M defensive front that's tied first in the nation in pretty much every major category. That Texas A&M defensive front has been the best defensive front in the nation through the early portions of this year. You look at the numbers, you look at the percentage of how they're affecting the quarterback, you look at sacks, it's all backed up. They're first, second, or third in almost every major category in terms of defensive front. Whenever that game started, one of the things that surprised me, and this is where numbers lie a little bit, Alabama gave up 5 sacks in that game. But if you go back and watch, it's a little bit misleading. The Alabama offensive line played a much better game. A lot of those sacks came from Milroe just trying to make a play, right? Some of them, he was just simply trying to make a play. Other times, the offensive line let him down. But I was worried about this game because we've seen an Alabama offensive line get beat really easily and handily throughout the year, though over the previous 2 weeks, they've certainly been improving. In fact, there was some All-22 film I was reviewing from the Mississippi State win of Caden Proctor, picking up some stunts and blitzes that were ran on him because they thought, okay, you're a true freshman, you've struggled, we're going to attack you. Caden Proctor's been playing a lot better, and he continued that into this game. The Alabama offensive line answered the call. I understand there were 5 sacks. Some of those sacks were quote-unquote coverage sacks. Some of those sacks came as a result of Milroe just trying to keep his eyes downfield and maybe not bailing from the pocket as quickly as he should if there was an opportunity to run, or bailing out of the pocket too quickly into pressure. Both of those things happened. That's not problematic. It is something you want to get cleaned up, but the Alabama offensive line, I think, answered the calls in a lot of ways. There's still a lot of growth they need to do. They are still no way near where they need to be, but they are an improving unit. Jalen Milroe, ladies and gentlemen, is starting to put college football on notice, because all I ever heard was that he was a one-read quarterback. And the people that said, hey, he's only doing one read, I already knew you're not necessarily watching the games, because Tommy Rees is not asking him to do one read. Tommy Rees is asking him to play this as if he is a pocket quarterback. And that continued against Texas A&M, where so many times he was able to either hit his first read or make it into his second. He is growing tremendously as a quarterback. And if I were to quote to all of you some of the numbers from this game, everybody in this chat would have told me Alabama would have lost. So I'm going to run by some of these numbers. Alabama, their leading rusher, had 45 yards and averaged 3.8. As a team, Alabama averaged less than 1 yard per carry. But at the end of that game, they had the opportunity to have beaten Texas A&M by as many as 2 touchdowns. One gets called back by one of the softest blindside block calls I have ever seen in my life. I have ever seen. Dallas Turner looked at somebody and got a flag thrown. Negated a touchdown, a huge touchdown. We can talk. It was one of the softest flags I've ever seen. We'll leave it there. It was tough to watch. But Alabama was in a position to beat this Texas A&M team by over 2 touchdowns on a day where they had 16 penalties, 9 pre-snap penalties. Ladies and gentlemen, do not let the score fool you. Alabama put together a hell of a performance, but still remains their own worst enemy. So this is truly one of those double-edged sword scenarios. There's a lot of good to take away from this game if you're an Alabama fan. Jalen Milroe continuing to grow, and if he plays like that against every other team they face, watch out. Watch out. Because they're going to be really tough. And that Alabama defense continues to be dangerous. Really dangerous. In fact, this morning I was looking, and where they rank in so many of these categories is just wild in terms of they're one of the only defenses in the nation per Pro Football Focus efficiency adjusted stats to be in the top 10 defenses for total defense, scoring defense, passing defense, and rushing defense. I mean, what Alabama's defense right now is doing is quite frankly unbelievable. I believe they are the highest graded coverage unit in the nation per Pro Football Focus. And if you look, they're not allowing second half scores. Outside that Texas game, they're not allowing offenses to take advantage of them. They handled the Ole Miss offense that just went and put 700 yards up on LSU. That Ole Miss offense is a top 5 offense in the nation, I believe. And Alabama handled that call. So Alabama has the ability to be a really good team still. Jalen Milroe is developing, but Alabama continues to prove they are their own worst enemy. At the end of the day, you cannot continue getting this many penalties and thinking you're going to come out on top, especially the pre-snap penalties, especially those pre-snap penalties. That has got to stop. You're handing teams opportunities to beat you. If you're Alabama, you're already everybody's Super Bowl. So why are you then giving them more ammunition to be able to beat you? And it is not a trend that is relegated to this game. It is a trend that we have seen time and time again. Alabama is going to be the biggest reason Alabama does not make it to where they want to go, if indeed they don't. Because they could have handled this past game. They honestly could have made a statement to all of college football after this past game. Now, they sent a message that we are an improving team. Everybody said you can't win with Jalen Milroe throwing the football. They averaged less than 1 yard on the ground, and Jalen Milroe had over 300 yards through the air. Jermaine Burton, bald. Isaiah Bond, bald. In fact, Jalen Milroe's 1 interception, clean it up, but I completely see what he was going for. I think, if anything, hats off to Bryce Anderson, the Texas A&M safety, who's a fantastic player. That guy's going to make a lot of money on Sundays. Number 1 for Texas A&M. If you're going to be watching a Texas A&M game, key in on Bryce Anderson. If you're not going to be watching that defensive front, key in on Bryce Anderson in the secondary. Their safety, free safety. He is a really good football player. He is a really good football player, and he allows for that secondary to find a lot of success. He made a great play intercepting that ball. So Alabama's offense continues to grow, but they are nowhere near a finished product. The running game has got to come together. Even though I'm saying that, hey, I think that the sack stats in this game are a little bit misleading because I think some of those sacks came as a result of either coverage sacks or maybe Jalen Milroe trying to bail out of the pocket right into pressure. That's not necessarily something that your offensive line should be put through the ringer for, but at the same time, Alabama's offensive line deserves to be put through the ringer because they've been bad. Point blank, period. They've been bad. So Alabama's offense continuing to come together. A lot of growth that needs to be had there. Let's move to Alabama's defense because we saw Deontay Lawson come back this week. We saw Deontay Lawson come back this week, and he is going to be on a list of Butkus Award winners in terms of the watch list. Danny Stutzman will be on that list. Hell, Danny Stutzman might be leading that list right now because I've said it before. I've said it again. He's been healthy so far this season. Deontay Lawson missed a game. Stutzman has been healthy, and you can't watch Oklahoma football on the defensive side of the ball. Watch everybody get up from a tackle and tell me how many times you watch 28 get up. He's there all the time. It's wild how he is a magnet to the football this year. But Deontay Lawson will see him at that award ceremony. You can bet your bottom dollar. I'd bet right now. They'll both be there. Who wins? I have no idea. There's a lot of big football to be played. That'll sort itself out. Whoever deserves to win it will win it. It'll all take care of itself. But I'd bet you copious amounts of money that they both are at the award. I'd bet a lot of money on that. I feel very comfortable in that bet. Deontay Lawson comes back and makes his presence known. Personally, I think that the best inside linebacker duo for the Crimson Tide is Lawson-Campbell. But I must say Tresman Marshall brings an edge in trying to stop the run. To me, it's just Campbell, even though he doesn't have the experience of Marshall, and sometimes he'll be a step off, I think his ceiling is so high in terms of how he can cover, how he can stop the run. I mean, for goodness gracious, ladies and gentlemen, the kid came in as a 5-star edge who 24/7 Sports comped to Micah Parsons, and now he's moved from 5-star edge to being an inside linebacker. He's that talented. But the guy I really want to talk about here is Caleb Downs, because we are seeing a superstar. We are seeing a superstar emerge right in front of us. Caleb Downs has came off of back-to-back wild weeks in terms of what he's been able to do for this Alabama defense. And this game right here, the interception he had was huge. Jalen Milroe just throws an interception. Texas A&M gets the ball back. All momentum going Texas A&M's way. Alabama has to get a stop. Alabama has got to force the issue. What happens? Caleb Downs runs down the tight end, jumps the route, and gets a beautiful interception. That was a major turning point in this game. In fact, last week, coming off of that game last week, if I'm not mistaken, I think Caleb Downs was not only the highest graded freshman in the nation, I think he was one of the top 3 highest graded safeties in the nation as a true freshman already. He's learning quickly. At the end of that game, Texas A&M completed a pass to Johnson. And I contend that in 3 weeks' time, that pass isn't complete. Caleb Downs jumps that route, intercepts it because he almost batted it away. It was a great job by the tight end to be able to bring it down, because right as the ball got there, you saw Caleb Downs' hand comes in, tips the football. Strong hands by the tight end. Real good play. Caleb Downs ended up making the tackle. Didn't matter. It was all good. But Caleb Downs is being asked to do it. He's playing strong safety. That's tough for a true freshman to do, because you're asked to both play pass and run. A lot is asked of him, and he's answering the call. Multiple interceptions, one of the highest graded defensive players in the nation. I know the highest graded safety that was a true freshman last week. And if I'm not mistaken, I'm fairly certain he was in the top 5 highest graded safeties in the nation. Caleb Downs is different. He was ranked as a top 5 player for a reason, and we're starting to see why. He's coming into his own. He is going to be a freaky good player. Alabama, for the false they're showing, are still one of the most talented teams in the country, and that is nothing. Yeah, 100%. And they're getting it figured out. They're starting to get it figured out. The defense is given, whether it's just pass or to take the check down. We're seeing some growth from Tommy Rees. 100%, man. 100%. Tommy Rees, one thing we have to realize, Jacob, the guy's only a few years older than I am. He's young. I'm 28. He's 31, 32. So he's just a few years older than me. Hell, we could have been in the same high school. You get what I'm saying? I was a freshman. He was a senior, just looking at like the way the years are split. And he's never worked with a quarterback like Jalen Milroe before. Now, that's not to excuse some of the incompetence we've seen, but it's just to kind of frame this is a totally different experience for him as well. Yeah. It's good not to have it. Yeah, Bowen is a dude. No doubt. No doubt. All right, let's move forward. Blunder of the weekend. Do we really need to talk about? I mean, we're going to. Absolutely, we're going to. But I think it's pretty obvious what the blunder of the weekend is, right? I mean, the blunder of the weekend has got to be Miami. And I don't think it's close. You are winning that game. You have the game won. In fact, if I'm not mistaken, ESPN, if you go during the games and look at the ESPN stats, they will put it together and show you the percentage each team plays or has to win. I think Miami was sitting at like a 99.7% chance to win. And they lost. It was one of those losses that when you look at it, you don't even feel bad unless you're a Miami fan. If you're a Miami fan, it feels bad. There's no doubt about that. But if you're from the outside looking in, like myself, and you're saying, hey, what does this mean? It's a loss that was so awe-inspiring, it's almost impressive. It begs the question, are we being memed on? Because I genuinely don't know. And what's worse, this is not the first time Mario Cristobal has lost a game in this fashion. I will point all of your attention back a few years ago, Oregon versus Stanford. I think much the same situation happened. I think that game was a little bit different. If I'm not mistaken, there was a bit more time left on the clock in that game. So circumstances were a bit different, but basically the same thing. Basically the same thing. How in the world do you let that happen? And coming out of that game, it's one of the oddest things in the world, but you saw one of the Miami players on the bench looking up, sweat coming down his face, looks like tears are streaming out of his eyes, and he's asking, what are we doing? And son, I was asking the exact same question look from my couch. I wasn't crying nor sweating. Cops hadn't started yet. But I was asking what you were doing. That is one of the biggest question mark plays we may ever see. And what did it cost Miami? You may ask yourself. It cost them an undefeated season. I'm not contending that Miami would have made it through the season undefeated. They've got some big games coming up, and we would figure out exactly who they are. But up until this point, Miami's been playing really good. Tyler Van Dyke has looked much more like the Tyler Van Dyke of old. In fact, if you look, he's grading as one of the best quarterbacks in the nation week in, week out. Miami defense was playing much better than they were last year. Much better than they were last year. So losing a game is fine. That's fine. Hell, you're going to lose. How many perfect seasons have we seen in college football? Odds are you're going to lose. It's very rare to see a perfect season, and that's fine. How do you lose? This analysis of mine has gotten me in trouble in the past. People have disagreed with me, but I will die on this hill. Wins are wins, losses are losses. Not all wins are created equal. Not all losses are created equal. It's just not. It is just not. Let's take Texas A&M, for example. What's a better loss? They're both losses, but what's a better loss? This past weekend where Alabama starts to look like, hey, maybe Alabama's offense is getting it figured out. Maybe their passing attack is starting to get it figured out. Is that a worse loss than whenever they lost to App State? No. In fact, everybody in here would say I would much rather lose to Alabama in a game where the Crimson Tide played pretty good outside of those penalties than I would rather lose to App State. Both are losses. They're totally different losses. Had Miami lost that game by 3 points, but it been a close game, Georgia Tech wins in a last-second field goal, that's easier to stomach. I'm not saying it's easy to stomach a loss, but that's much easier to stomach that loss and say, hey, they had the last opportunity and they took advantage of it. Hats off to them. We didn't take advantage of it. They did. Congratulations. As opposed to, we gifted this to you. We could have kneed the ball, won the game, and gone on into the next week with our undefeated season, and yet we gave you the ball. Like I said, it's almost impressive when we look at this. It is almost impressive when we look at this. What Miami does next, I can't wait to see. Because if we look at the big picture, right, one loss doesn't define you. And I completely understand that. And I'm certainly not trying to pile on or make it seem like that. This loss is bad because of how it happened. Miami responded very well this season in terms of how they played last year. How do you respond after that loss? Because they responded well from a terrible season last year into the early portions of this year. How do you respond after that loss? I can't wait to see it because I truly do believe it was the blunder of the weekend. Let's hit some comments. H-Town's fine. It says, hey, family, how is everyone? Glad you're here. H-Town, he says, can I ask a question of subject? Yeah, man. Ask whatever you'd like. Jim says, Jimbo knew the deep ball is the one throw Milrose great at, yet Reese still set those plays up for him to be successful. He should get way more respect. Look, it's really is an example of watching an offense grow. And that's what we're seeing at Alabama right now. A lot of growth left to be done. The penalties have got to stop. I mean, that right there is just foolish at this point. There's no excuse for it. But that being said, we are seeing a growth from the offensive coordinator and from the quarterback. And I think that right there alone is huge. I think that alone is huge. Season, it's been crazy, yeah. Georgia Tech led most of the game. Miami quarterback was horrible. He's been good through much of this year. Tyler Van Dyke has been really good much of this year. But it's actually kind of wild how Haynes King went over to Miami, and now he's kind of having his resurgence here. Kind of cool to see. Kind of cool to see that. Yeah. Bowen and Downs are not in the same position. No, Bowen plays cheetah and free, and Downs plays strong. Yeah, very true, Audacious. Very true. Very true. He will not be now. Stutzman is going to just, not saying that Stutzman is alone, it's just that Stutzman is playing unbelievable football. Yeah, Terry says Oklahoma pulled the upset with game planning and determination. Maybe not playoff level, but certainly New Year's Six club. Listen, Terry, the schedule sets up very favorably for Oklahoma right now, which is why whenever I had that conversation about can Oklahoma make the playoffs, I pulled up their schedule. Because they could win out. Now, I do believe whoever wins that Big 12 championship, like that's the game, right? And I do believe there are some tricky games, some sneaky tricky games on the Sooners schedule, right? And you can quote me as having said that right now. That way, whenever Oklahoma, if they go undefeated, someone can't say like, oh, well, you know, Ty said that these games were going to be easy. No, I do see some. Kansas is going to be fun. I'm really excited to see Kansas. I have y'all beating West Virginia very easily, but I'm excited to see how you get it back. Right? A little bit of a revenge game, a little bit of a get-back game. Really excited to see that. And then BYU at Provo. Always fun to see your team go on the road, especially in an environment like that. New. It's going to be a lot of fun. But the schedule sets up very favorably for Oklahoma to be able to take advantage of it, continue winning, and make it out on that other side. It all comes down to the Big 12 championship. So yeah, really, really going to be a lot of fun. How good is North Carolina? Listen, man, that offense is really good. Tez Walker comes back, and I think he just adds another layer. Drake May, when he's on, he's one of the best quarterbacks in the nation. And that North Carolina defense, I haven't keyed in on them in a while. I actually probably need to go back, rewatch the North Carolina-Syracuse game and watch that North Carolina defense. But I remember after the South Carolina game, I was amazed. Now, we have more data. We know that the South Carolina offensive line isn't very good. They're not great. But they got almost half the amount of pressures and sacks in the South Carolina game than they had all last season. And so the defense put up huge numbers in that game. If that defense continues to take steps forward, they're going to be a tough team. Very tough team. What possibility for Oklahoma to play USC in the playoff? I meant if they play with Tebow, curl, and fetal position. What possibility? That's interesting. That's interesting, South. It's certainly possible. It certainly is possible. I have hesitancy because if you're asking me right now, who has an easier path to the playoff remaining? Well, let me double check this USC schedule, but I think USC's got a bit of a gauntlet they're about to go through. They're about to have it tough. They just outlasted Arizona. You got Notre Dame, you got Utah, you got Cal, you got Washington, you got Oregon, you got UCLA. That's a gauntlet, ladies and gentlemen. That is a gauntlet. Very, very few times in the past few years we have looked at a Pac-12 schedule and thought to ourselves, thank God my favorite team does not play that schedule. Let's be honest here, because I'm an Alabama fan. As much as I would love to see them play that, Alabama's still got things they're working out. You're playing as a USC team. You have to take on Notre Dame this weekend. Utah after that. Cal after that. In fact, Cal is the only team in this 6-game stretch that is not ranked as a top 25 opponent. They're the only team not ranked as a top 25 opponent. Notre Dame ranked 21, Utah 16, Washington 7, Oregon 8, UCLA 18. USC has got a really tough stretch to make it to the playoffs. And so South on Main Arts and Culture, whenever you saw some hesitancy in my voice there, it's because USC, man, if they make it out of there, they will have earned that playoff spot. But I think that there's some conversations about can they make it out of there? And I think this is a perfect segue into our last topic, which I thought I had a little thing made for it. We need to talk about USC's big red flag. But before we can, we need to talk about a big red flag. And that's if you're not enjoying Shady Mile bourbon. Shady Mile, ladies and gentlemen. Y'all already know if I have the opportunity to cut a promo, I'm going to cut an elite promo. Shady Mile working with the channel. They sent over some bottles of their rye and their wheat-based whiskeys. Very kind of them. They also have a promo that they're running right now. You order 2 bottles, they send you a free shirt. They've got a lot of cool stuff over there. Big thank you to Shady Mile Bourbon for working with the channel. As a smaller content creator like myself, it's absolutely massive whenever brands like this trust the channel to be able to work with us. It allows us to keep the lights on. It allows us to continue doing what we do. Big shout out to Shady Mile. But as always, not to be a boomer, if you're going to drink, always drink responsibly. The only way we can meet here and talk about football every single day is if we all play our part. So enjoy yourself, enjoy your weekends, enjoy some Shady Mile, but always drink responsibly. Now, let's talk about USC's big red flag. And it's not a lack of Shady Mile. In fact, that might help them. They might need some Shady Mile. Jeremy, you're keyed in on exactly what I was saying right there, brother. That schedule that they have is a gauntlet. It is tough, man. Like, unironically, tough. Very tough. I'll answer this right here as well. Sorry if I missed it, but what do you think of Texas still being ranked in front of some undefeated teams? I'm fine with it, Rand, because it's not like Texas got their ass kicked by Oklahoma. You lost. I think you lost in several different areas, but you showed that you were a good team. Coming out of that game, and I'll quickly say this, coming out of that game, the notion is Oklahoma is one of the most improved football teams, one of the most impressive coaching jobs we've seen in terms of a one-year turnaround, what Brent Venables has done. I mean, the man might be up for coach of the year, quite frankly. Quite frankly. But that doesn't take away that Texas is a good team. Two ideologies can be true at the same time, that Brent Venables has had an unbelievable turnaround at Oklahoma and that Texas is a really, really good football team. It's part of the reason why you haven't heard me say anything really negative about Texas. It's all been, well, Sark wants to hit the deep shot. Oklahoma took that away. Because I do believe that this is the story of two good teams playing each other as opposed to one team that we found out maybe not be that good. Texas is still a really good football team. I think that Texas's win over Alabama is looking better and better as the weeks go on, especially as Alabama is really finding themselves. That Alabama defense is one of the best in the nation. In fact, if I'm not mistaken, I had it pulled up earlier. Let's actually check this out right now. One of the better defenses in the nation. Offense is still painful. Quite frankly, they have no semblance of a rushing attack any way we thought they would, but they're growing. And Jalen Milroe is really growing as a quarterback. It's actually so much fun to watch his growth at the quarterback position. He looks like he's having fun, and I'm having a lot of fun watching him. So I think that Texas is still a really good team. I don't think that there's any question about that. Texas is still a very good team. Oklahoma beat a very good team. I think that that's the analysis on it. I don't mind Texas still being ranked high because I still think they have one of the better wins this year going into Tuscaloosa, beating Alabama. Alabama continues to show they're still a good team. We wrote Alabama off too early. Now, the offense, if you want to question the offense, bring all your questions right here. We'll form a giant circle. We'll sing Kumbaya. Someone can bring marshmallows. I have the Shady Mile. We'll have a great time. We'll have that conversation. That's a genuine conversation to have. The defense is spoken for. No, Texas is still a good team. And this is where I fall, Blood. The story is not about Texas not being a good team. Texas is a really good team. Oklahoma just showed us they are a really, really, really good football team. Coming into this game, whenever I would ask the question how good Oklahoma is, and Blood, you knew this because we talked about this, whenever I'd ask the question how good is Oklahoma, it wasn't to question is Oklahoma a good football team? Far from it. I was literally asking, where do I rank them between 1 and 12? Because they kept coming in at 12, and I was sitting here looking like, okay, I know they're a good football team, but where do I rank them prior to this week between 1 and 12? That was my question in terms of how good is Oklahoma? Where do I place them along this line? Where do I place them? Because I can visually tell they're one of the best teams in the nation. Eye test pass. Where do I place them? Well, after this win, it gets much easier to place them. But that doesn't diminish that Texas is a good team. It proves that Texas is a good team. Oklahoma is a very good team. That's the story. That's it. In my opinion, at least. I'm not clairvoyant or anything, but kind of feel like this is the new era with the transfer portal teams can rebuild in the year. Crazy new times, especially for Blue Bloods. 100% Ram, but I also think we need to give credit where it's due. They got some true freshmen out there playing well. They got some, and Brent Venables has done an unbelievable job. Unbelievable job in 1 year. Sensational. Truly. One important thing that happened in the OU Texas game was Jackson Arnold got a firsthand view of what it takes to play in the game, and most importantly, what it takes to win the game. Love this comment right here. Love that comment right there. Ty, why is most of the media still riding with Texas in the rematch? Because they're a very good team, Stephen. Because they're a very good team. Right, and this is something I said on the Hall of Fame media podcast with Jason right after the game. There were some people coming in, and I love it, right? Fans after a win, you always deserve to talk your talk. But there were some people coming into Jason's live show saying, see, this proves that Texas isn't a good team. And I kind of pushed back on that, and I said, no. You don't realize that you're arguing against your own interests right now by saying, and not anybody here, the pejorative, not anybody here, obviously, Stephen. This is certainly not directed at you. Point being, I've seen some people, right, and it's all fans do this, you hear Alabama fans after they beat A&M being like, see, A&M was trash. I'm sitting here like, guys, that A&M team wasn't trash. In fact, they probably had a genuine grievance not coming into that game ranked whenever 2-loss LSU was ranked. A&M's only loss was to Miami prior to that. A&M was a good team. So too is Texas. So that's why I think some media is still riding with Texas, Stephen, because y'all beat a really, really good team. Now, I think that there needs to be a deeper, nuanced conversation about that game because now we have data, right? Like now I have data to go off of, and that certainly changes the way I view this. But I think it's also important that we look at this and see it for what it truly is. And that's why I love Rand's question. Rand, I think that was a really solid question because I think it paved the way for a very necessary discussion that, in full disclosure, I had failed to present. So thank you very much for that. That was a fantastic question and paved the way for a really great discussion. Thank you very much for that. That was awesome. Thank you. Blood says, with the NCAA making changes to the portal and transfers in general, do you see less players hitting the portal going forward? I have no idea, Blood. I have no idea. That change right there is so wild to me because I don't know what teams are going to do. I haven't quite figured out the portal quite yet. I'm going to be very honest here, guys. I'm still enamored by the portal because it's still a little bit of an enigma to me in terms of how teams are going to view the efforts they put into recruiting as opposed to the efforts they put into the transfer portal. So, Shadow says, no, I'd put Texas 20 to 25th. I think that's a little harsh considering LSU is a 2-loss team and was still ranked in there. And I'll go a step further, Shadow. I think that that's still a little harsh because Notre Dame is ranked 21 right now. Texas has the better loss than Notre Dame. Notre Dame now has 2 losses, and they're still in the top 25 teams. Texas has one of the best losses in the nation. And remember, I've always caught heat for saying this. I'll die on this hill. There are good wins. There are wins. There are losses, and then there are losses that you can point to and say, we lost, but man, damn, they look good, right? I still think Texas has one of those losses that you point to right now. And you're like, hey, that's... And they still have one of the best wins. Like, every week that Bama improves, it's a better win for Texas. And by extension, a better win for Oklahoma. You get what I mean? So now Oklahoma's in a position where they want Bama to do good. Because the better Bama does, then Texas gets to say, oh, we have that Bama win. That means that we have a great win. And then Oklahoma can say, okay, well, you have that great win. We have the win over you. So it gets very intricate here, but I don't think I'd be that harsh, Shadow. I really don't. I understand where you're going with this, and I definitely respect the analysis of like not playing complete games because, Shadow, we talked about this. You and I talked about this. You at some point, Texas needs to be a full-time employee. You don't ask a part-time employee to do a big dog's job. But I still think they played well against OU. I don't think that Texas played an awful game. I think a lot of the mistakes Texas made were brought about from Oklahoma's defense forcing them into those situations outside of that first pick. Gentry played that first pick amazing. Hats off to... I don't know why Quinn threw that ball. I will never understood why that ball got thrown. Now, that second pick, Billy Bowman was headhunting. Hey, that was some Denton Ryan on Denton Ryan crime. He hit him clean as a whistle, right in the chest, exactly as they teach it. That was a hell of a play by Billy Bowman. I remain real high on Billy Bowman. OU fans in here, you'll know I was high on him whenever he got to Oklahoma. And my whole thing was just put him out there. Figure out a position where you can park him for 3 years because I don't think he's going to stay for 4. If he does, good for him. The crazy thing about Billy Bowman is he's already this good. He still has learning to do. He's a really gifted player, guys. Like, he's a very gifted player. Big play. Everyone had Texas 1-3, but OU gets put at 5. Yeah, I think that's a fair complaint. I think that's a fair complaint, Blood. I was curious as to where OU would be placed. I wouldn't read too much into that because there are undefeated teams in front of them, though I do contend very few undefeated teams in front of OU have a loss that I think is better. Or I sincerely apologize. Let me rephrase that. I apologize. I don't think teams in front of OU have a win as good as OU in terms of some of them. But I will say this, Blood. Your grievances are perfectly well placed. I think you're very well to have them. I guarantee you the playoff committee paid attention. You know what I mean? I think the people that mattered, they paid attention. They saw. Not forget this. Hey, look, I respect fandom. I got a lot of respect for fandom. That Louisville defense came to play. You know what? Y'all want to hear about some of this Louisville Notre Dame game? Let's talk about it because I picked Notre Dame to win and no more. No mas. Well, actually, I don't know about this weekend. Damn it. They play USC and I might pick Notre Dame to win that game. Oh, man. Let's talk about this game, guys. Notre Dame against Louisville. Now, when we picked this game on Bleacher Report, I picked Notre Dame, but I was hesitant for this reason. Louisville has jumped out on teams. Absolutely jumped out on teams. They've looked really good. Notre Dame has kind of been starting slow. At the end of the day, this Louisville team, right, their defense is ferocious. Let's pull up some of the stats so we can walk through this. The defense is ferocious. Offense is putting it on teams. In fact, once again, guys, another trend. Before this game, I think Louisville had scored 34 points in the first quarter of games and held opponents to 0. Well, once again, first quarter, Louisville 7, Notre Dame nothing. This Louisville team in the first quarter, they are jumping out on teams. Like they are getting you down quickly. And they're not looking back. Here's the part, guys. You're going to have a hard time winning big college football games if you're allowing a team to run it straight down your throat. Understand, there's a difference in a team finding success running as opposed to someone just running it right down your throat. Louisville ran it right down their throat. Jawar Jordan, 21 carries, 143 yards, 6.8 average, 2 touchdowns, a long of 45. So even if I take away your long, you're still averaging almost 5 yards a pop, right? So we can't even give the argument that it was one long carry. He's still averaging almost 5 yards a pop. You're averaging almost 5 yards a pop in D1 college football. You're doing your job. If Notre Dame can't stop a team running, they're going to be in trouble. A lot of trouble. Now, the one thing is they did not allow for Plummer to throw it all over them. That was something good. But we also saw this Notre Dame offense really struggle. Audric Estime started off this year, and he had to be a Heisman favorite. And I'm certainly not saying he is no longer, but a lot of people have caught up real quick. Real quick. Audric Estime for the second week in a row was largely held in check. Actually, I think we can go back to 3 weeks. Let's take a look at this. Let's go game log 2023. Against Louisville, 10 carries, 20 yards, averaged of 2. Now, he did go off against Duke, more normal Audric Estime numbers. He averaged 4.5 per, 18 carries, 81 yards, 2 touchdowns, a long of 30, 4 receptions, 25 yards. So he got active, over 100 all-purpose yards, fair. Against Ohio State, 14 carries, 70 yards, 0 in the receiving game. So we're seeing a trend, right? Whenever Audric Estime is involved, this offense is clicking. But also, I think we're seeing Notre Dame play a higher caliber opponent than we saw them play previously. We've seen Notre Dame these past few weeks play an opponent that is just better. I mean, we look at Notre Dame's early work this year, right? Let's look at their early work. They had Navy, they had Tennessee State, they had North Carolina State, they had Central Michigan. They beat up on all of them handily. Well, now we've seen them play 3 straight ranked opponents. They barely beat Duke on a last-second play. Hats off. Great win. Great win. I don't mean to say that in being reductionist. I'm being sincere. That's a really good win. Duke's a really good team. Mike Elko is putting college football on notice. Big fan of what's happening there right now. And then you get beaten by Louisville. So I do believe that they will test. I think they're going to test USC this weekend. But my faith in them being able to beat USC has certainly diminished. But I think that paves the conversation really quick for us to transition on this. USC's big red flag. Guys, we've talked about this before. I'm not going to keep you here very long. We've already gone over an hour. We're at an hour and 10 minutes. So we're not going to spend a whole lot of time on this because I don't want to beat a dead horse, to be quite frank. I've talked about this time and time and time again. And I think after week 1, I released a video saying, hey, I think USC's defense, they have a problem. And I had a lot of people instantly comment on that video, a lot of USC fans, and say, too early. You're making this video way too early. And you know what? They were probably right there. Now, in the long run, I was right. I was 100% right. There's a problem. But I will give credit where it's due. After 1 week of football, it's probably too early to say anything definitively. And that was my fault. Lesson learned. But I was right, though. Should I have said it definitively? No. It's not like I can sit here and say that because I truly believe we need to allow teams time to develop. But that USC defense is a problem. It is a problem, and not in a good way. When I look at OU's defense, when I look at Alabama's defense, when I look at Ohio State's defense, when I look at Georgia's defense, when I look at Texas's defense, I say those are problem defenses in a good way. Meaning if you're an offense playing those defenses, you got a damn problem on your hands. You got some shit to figure out. If you're playing the USC's defense, if you're an offensive coordinator, you have no problem. In fact, you have a solution. You have the exact opposite of a problem. The problem then falls on your team's defensive coordinator. That's who has a problem. I said going into this year, USC has the ability to be an outlier. Now, I've said this time and time again. If you don't know what I'm referring to when I say an outlier, it's because we've only seen 3 teams whose scoring defense ranks outside the top 20 defenses in college football since 2000 win a national championship. 2010 Auburn, 2014 Ohio State, 2019 LSU. 2019 LSU is the largest outlier, coming in as the number 53rd scoring defense in the nation. I'm sorry, 2010 Auburn, not LSU. LSU is the second highest outlier, coming in at 32nd. Then you have 2014 Ohio State coming in at like 24th. All those teams had phenomenal offenses, and I do think it's important to mention that 2010 Auburn also had one of the biggest cheat codes we've ever seen in the game of football at any level. Pee-wee, flag, sarcastable, college, JUCO, NFL, it doesn't matter. Cam Newton is one of the most dominant presences in football we've ever seen. Period. Full stop. They had that. They had Cam. So yeah, they had an outlier. They had the outlier of all outliers, Cam Newton. But I do believe USC has the offense, and Caleb is good enough to be on that list of outliers. I do believe USC has the ability to be a team to be able to say, hey, we have a defense that ranks anywhere from 20th to 40th. We can win a national championship. I believe that. I think Caleb is that good. I think he presents that much of a threat, both in terms of what he's able to do with his arm, how he's able to keep you honest with his legs. I really wish they would have a stronger rushing attack up to this point. I would feel much better about their offense in terms of being able to mitigate some of the defensive issues if they were able to run the football a little bit better, right? It's just like we talked about. You want an off-speed pitch. Can you develop that off-speed pitch? I'd like to see them, and they're running for 519 yards. So I apologize. I think I'm probably underselling that. It's just because we see Caleb do so much. Scratch that. USC's running the ball very well. Yeah, USC's running the ball very well. I think it's just because you see Caleb do so much, it kind of gets lost on me. I apologize for that. They're running the ball very well. But I think that creates a bigger issue, that you're running the ball that well and your defense is still struggling that much. This defense has got to get it together because Caleb Williams is putting it all out there. I don't care whether you like Caleb, whether you dislike Caleb. Pretend he doesn't have a number. Pretend you don't know his name. It's the first time you've ever watched him play. The young man is laying it all out on the field, and he doesn't have another side of the football to hold up their end of the bargain. What happens when Caleb isn't there? I like Malachi Nelson a lot. A lot. I think Miller Moss is a good quarterback. Are they outliers? Those are two massively different things. Understand that now. You can be a really good quarterback. You can be one of the better quarterbacks in college football. Are you an outlier? I don't know. Because outliers don't come about every single day. That's why they're outliers. I know Caleb can be an outlier. I know that. I've seen it. We have seen it. It's not a guess. The answer is yes. I didn't mean to rhyme, but I can do it anytime. We watched Caleb make unbelievable jumps from year 1 into year 2, and we're seeing more jumps from year 2 into year 3. He can be an outlier. But what happens when there is no more Caleb? Because right when there's no more Caleb, you now move to the Big Ten. We've seen Alex Grinch's defensive philosophy not work in the Big Ten. We saw it at Ohio State, where he had a much higher caliber of athlete on that defense than he currently has. Now, all respect to guys such as Damani Jackson, Gentry, Anthony Lucas, Bear Alexander, Shane Lee. All respect to you guys, because I think you guys are playing your heart out. But top to bottom, it's not a good defense. It's a bad defense. Let's call a spade a spade. It's not a good defense. It's not. And I even heard some talk that, depending on who the number 1 pick is, maybe Caleb will decide he doesn't want to go out into the NFL draft. He'll go back to college. Hey, I'm all down with seeing more Caleb Williams in college football. The kid is that good. Sign me up. Because, we only have so many opportunities to watch a talent like him play football. Enjoy it. Enjoy it. Seriously. Even if you're not a fan, enjoy it because his talent is something that does not walk through a door every day. That's why he's an outlier. I don't think he comes back if he feels like I am going to have to do everything and anything in between for us just to win. Forget a national championship. For us just to win, I've got to do everything and anything. It's not a position you want to put your quarterback in. You want to foster an environment to where if your quarterback is giving you everything, and Caleb is, you are able to give everything in return. And they're not. They're just not. I really wanted USC to be good because I think it's good for college football. I think it's good for the pack, what was left of the pack. And I think they are a good football team. I don't think there's any question that USC is a good football team. That's not the question. That's not the discussion. The discussion is, can they win a national championship? Until that defense shows me they've showed up, my answer is no. No, I don't believe they can. I don't believe they can. I would love to be proven wrong. I really would. Because there's a lot of talented players on that defense that personally I really like watching them play. I love Gentry's game. Damani Jackson is a player that I wanted to go to Alabama when he was coming out of high school. Former 5-star cornerback. Really, really think he's a talented player. Shane Lee transferred from Alabama to USC. You got Anthony Lucas. You got Bear Alexander. You got Branch on the defensive side. Zion Branch over there. I mean, there's a lot. There's a lot. So we got to see. We certainly have to see. But as of right now, I would not pick USC to be able to win a national championship. Because as of right now, I don't know that I'm picking USC to win the pack. And that's not because I don't think USC is a good team. I know USC is a good team. Heck, before the year, that was who I was saying I think will win the pack was USC. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we're 6 weeks in. I don't feel that way anymore. I now have access to data from this year, and I don't feel that way anymore. I don't. I think we are in for a real treat getting to see them play Oregon and Washington. I think we as college football fans win. Ladies and gentlemen, that's going to do it for today's episode of Through the Haze. We'll be back here tomorrow, 10 o'clock Central Standard Time, talking all things college football. Going to release some videos tomorrow in terms of what you can expect from me for the rest of the day. Unfortunately, probably no videos today, only because here in the next hour, you can catch me over on Bleacher Report breaking down that Alabama A&M game. So going to go rewatch some film on that. You can find me over there. And then this evening, 5:30 Central Standard Time, you can catch us over on the channel as we have our Red River Roundtable, where some of the Texas guys should be making their way onto the channel. You already know some of the Oklahoma guys will be there. It'll be a good time as we kind of talk about the game, break it all down. You don't want to miss it. Thank you all for being in here. A special thank you to Shady Mile and Home Field. Guys, if you haven't already, hit the like button. Be sure to subscribe. That way you can join this amazing community. And until next time, that's it. See ya.